Hello, everyone. This is DP Lyle, also known as Doug. I want to welcome you to my new podcast series here on Authors on the Air. It's titled Criminal Mischief, the Art and Science of Crime Fiction. What the plans are is to discuss all things crime, both fictional and real. I want to talk some about the creative aspects of crime fiction writing. Things such as character and plot and voice, point of view, and all those things that we writers have to do to create a credible story. I also will have some shows where I'll talk about science, forensic science, investigative techniques, how all these things work in real life and how they work in fiction. And hopefully we'll have a lot of examples of that along the way. Let's begin by talking about what the heck is crime fiction anyway. Well, basically, it's a story in which a crime is taking an integral part in the storytelling. And in fact, it's often the focal point of the entire story. This crosses all genres, but of course, mysteries and thrillers. That goes without saying. Also, literary fiction, romance, adventure stories, YA, a, a lot of other genres that you might not think actually do revolve around crimes of one type or another. Crimes come in a lot of different flavors. You know that. You see it on the news all the time. You've lived life. You understand that criminal activity really knows no bounds. It is actually amazing what people will do. Crimes such as theft and burglary and robbery, where you take something that doesn't belong to you. Your mother told you that in grammar school. You don't swipe somebody's lunch money. You don't rummage around in their locker. But people do that. They steal from one another. They embezzle. This happens more frequently than people realize, and also people often get away with it. There's assaults of all types. This is in the news all the time. A lot of them are drug and alcohol infused. A lot of them are hate crimes. A lot of them are just people smack each other in the face for no reason. Of course, there's rape and sexual assaults. There's child abuse. There's other more mundane things, but just sometimes just as painful to the individual, such as extortion, arson, where someone's house is burned down or business is burned down, often for the purposes of revenge or to cover another crime. There's ID theft, and now internet ransom, where they come and tie up your computer and demand money to get it back. There's kidnapping. There's forgery, DUI. DUI is a crime. There's drug dealing. There's trafficking of many types, but particularly human trafficking. There's pimping and prostitution. This happens on the internet. It happens on the streets. There's car theft. And way back in the day, there's horse theft, which is still against the law. There's product theft, where people steal from their company. Um, they will be carrying televisions and things out the back door while they're supposed to be doing inventory. This happens all the time. But is this the heart of crime fiction? Is this what most people write about? No. All these crimes may be involved, and in fact, they often are. But it comes down to murder. The body count in most stories is at least one. Sometimes it's a lot higher. But murder seems to be at the heart of most crime fiction, a killing of some type. Why is this? Well, of all the crimes we've talked about, and there's those and a whole lot more, murder is the most final. There's no coming back from that. It's done. Roll the tape, roll the credits, end of story. It is the most heinous of crimes, and it dates all the way back to when Cain whacked Abel. So this has been in the human DNA for a long, long time. And in crime fiction, it's murders that are often at the heart of the story. So the question is why do people kill each other? What's the motives? And why is that important? Well, remember, when police approach a crime of any kind, the simple formula they use is why plus how equals who. Why someone did it, how they did it, will uncover the person that did it. Well, the how, and we'll talk about some of this in later talks, is the MO. It's what weapon they used, how they got that weapon, how they disposed of it. It's where the murder took place. It's how they got from point A to point B, how they got away, how they remained undetected, what their alibi was. You know, everybody's got to be somewhere. So you have to have an alibi for why you weren't at the crime scene. There's the time that it's done, day, night, noon, the location that it's done. All these things are the MO. They are the mechanics of the killing, if you will. But the why is the thing that police want to know the most. It's the why that determines who actually did it, who had a motive, who profits from this, what gain can an individual make from this murder. And this is at the heart of so many murders, and in fact, all. Even serial killers have a reason. It may not make sense to us, but they have a reason. It's self-satisfaction, it's power and control, it's to, for financial gain. The serial killers aren't all Ted Bundys. They're not all sexually deviant murderers. There's many reasons they just kill people serially, but they all have a reason. So many of the motives that we'll talk about here can apply to serial killers too. But the classic Ted Bundy type, he had a motive, he had a reason. We may never understand it. Fred, listen to me. Ted tried to articulate it a few times, but I'm not sure he could ever tell what he was really feeling. These things are deep and dark and hard to understand. But let's look at other motives for murder, things that you can use in your stories, things that you might not have thought of for subplots or main plots in your stories. Financial gain. This is a huge, huge reason for murder. Money is the root of all evil, as they say, uh, and it's the root of many murders. Insurance payouts are huge. If someone stands to gain $100,000 or $10 million by the death of someone, that's a pretty good motive for taking that person out. It's always amazed me in real life how many people will take out a $500,000 insurance policy on their wife a month before they kill her, or the wife kills the husband. It goes both ways. But it's amazing how often they'll do that, like, well, no one's going to notice. Really? If suddenly you come into a $500,000 and this policy's only been around for a few weeks, and then suddenly this person falls down some stairs or is shot in the head, or their car's tampered with and they wreck it, or they take some poison by accident, really? It doesn't happen that way. There is a financial payoff there. There's inheritance. How many family intrigues have revolved around, they want granddad's money, so let's bump off granddad. This happens all the time, probably more than we even know. There's embezzlement. There's business takeovers. There's stealing money from companies, and there's people who want to take over a business for financial gain. Why own 50% of a company when you can own 100% of it if your partner's dead? This is the motive for many murders. There's the avoidance of alimony and child support. I mean, for goodness sakes, people have even killed their children to avoid paying for them. That's beyond the pale. But spousal murders are very often financially motivated. They're often motivated for other reasons too, but financial often plays a role in it. Why do you want to pay a few $1,000s a month alimony when you could just drop some mercury in his coffee and it's over with? Property disputes. How many neighbors have shot each other over the fence or thrown a bomb in each other's house because they're having some dispute over the line where the fence is supposed to be built? Or someone says they own a piece of property and the other person says they don't. Dispute breaks out, and the next thing you know, it's warfare. Revenge, another common motive. People feel slighted. They feel their friends are slighted. They feel put upon. Or maybe they were truly damaged in some way. Maybe someone did steal from them. Maybe someone did harm a friend, a relative, a loved one. Maybe they do have a reason to be angry and they just take it a little too far. There's political murders. These go without saying. They've been around throughout history where, Julius Caesar was murdered basically for political reasons. Assassinations of all types. Um, so political is always out there, and in many thrillers that are international spy thrillers and stuff, assassination is behind it. The great book Day of the Jackal, one of the best books I've ever read, basically was about an assassination attempt on de Gaulle's life, and it is brilliantly written, but it's a political murder that is at the heart of the story. Cults and religions. This opens so many doors that I'm not even sure where to start. But people do kill each other for religious reasons. Uh, this religion and that religion don't get along, so they kill each other all the time. Murders happen all the time. The Middle East is, you don't have to look any further than there right now. But this has gone throughout history. Uh, Man has always felt like when he found his religion, that then he had the answer, and therefore anybody who didn't agree with him was wrong. So deeply held religious beliefs kind of breed ignorance and arrogance. You're ignorant because you quit looking for the answers because you think you found them, and arrogant because you think your answers are the only answers available, and anybody who doesn't agree with you is wrong. Um, and the truth is they're probably all right, or they're all wrong. Who knows? But the point is that these types of things can escalate, and people can murder each other over religious beliefs. It happens all too frequently, and cults are another animal. A lot of people say the difference between a cult and religion is the size of the membership. There's some truth to that. I mean, they all have tenets. They all have an end of world scenario. They all have a great flood type scenario. They all have a charismatic leader, et cetera, et cetera. They all require devotion and certain ritualistic behaviors. But at the end of the day, cults are a special animal. You always think of Jim Jones and Jonestown. You think of the Manson family. Uh, Cults not only commit murders because they people see people outside the cult as problematic, and they want to go rectify that. They want to deal some damage to those individuals who don't believe in what they believe in, or they're internal. There's a power struggle within the cult itself, or there's disbelievers who are trying to leave the cult and expose whatever goes on in that cult. All of these things are driving motives for murder. There's murder for hire. This happens not infrequently too. And remember, if you hire someone to kill someone, you're just as guilty as the person that pulled the trigger, at least in the eyes of the law. Conspiracy to commit murder, conspiracy to actually do the murder, uh, is a viable prosecution. It's amazing to me how many people, when they decide to do this, end up hiring a hitman, and I put that in quotations, that happens to be an undercover police officer. And the reason is so many people ask somebody at work, hey, you know anybody I can hire to kill somebody? Really? You're just going to ask your coworker that? Or they ask the guy down at the garage where you get your oil changed, or they ask the doorman at a Las Vegas casino. It's um, it's amazing how often they do that, and then the person says, well, here, call Joe. Well, Joe actually decides that this is something he doesn't want to be involved in, so he involves the police, and the next thing you know, they got you on audio and video trying to hire someone to kill your spouse. Happens all the time, but it's great fodder for storytelling. There's empathy and sympathy murders, if you want to kind of put it that way. The classic example of these are the angel of death, the nurses and other workers in the hospital who murder people serially. Serial killers in the hospital are hard to catch simply because they have access to a lot of tools that are hard to trace because people are on medications all the time, they're on IV drips, and you're dealing with people who are already almost dead in many circumstances, but people who are very, very ill. And so death is not unexpected in a hospital. And so when someone dies, nobody looks. Nobody says, well, was this an overdose of potassium chloride or digitalis or morphine or whatever. People don't look for those things until a bunch of them pile up. But a lot of these killers at the end of the day will come out and say, well, I didn't want her to suffer. She was a little old lady with a fractured hip and diabetes and pneumonia, and she was suffering so, and my job is to help that suffering, and that's what I took the oath for. No, that's not the reason. And when it happens a dozen times, it's definitely not the reason. It's power and control, and it's the thrill. Some of them do it to make things happen, make crises happen so that then they can step in and save the person. And they're not always able to, and therefore it becomes a murder rather than attempted murder. The famous case of Janine Jones in the hill country of Texas, where she injected children with succinylcholine so they would stop breathing, and then she could step in and resuscitate them and be the hero. So there's many motives behind these so-called empathy and sympathy murders. But what about the elderly couple at home where one spouse is bedridden and no longer with us, so to speak, and the spouse kills them, does something to kill them, overdoses them on a medication, smothers them with a pillow, whatever, shoots them in the head, whatever. These are true sympathy and empathy killings. They're murder, but at the end of the day, often courts and the police will decide not to prosecute these cases. And you can see the ramifications there, and you can see how that can play into your story as far as family history and the ghost of some character in the background, because this happens not infrequently. Crimes of passion, you hear about these all the time. Someone gets just completely furious or goes completely over the top or is in a jealous rage, and they do something way over the top and way stupid, and then later realize that was not a smart move. And of course, then they always um, plead innocent because they were crazy. The insanity defense, the temporary insanity defense. Some jurisdictions allow that. Some judges allow that in their courtroom. Others don't. So that's something you can play with in storytelling too. Domestic violence. Wow, this is a huge subject. Huge, huge subject. It's amazing how passion breeds passion, and people who love each other hate each other. That kind of thing. There's a dichotomy to human existence that things that on the surface you step back that just saying, really, why didn't you just get a divorce, or why didn't you just leave? Why did that annoy you so much? But when it's there day after day in your face, people make bad decisions. They become so angered. This stuff builds so much inside, the resentment, the animosity, the hatred, and the next thing you know, they commit a stupid act. This happens all the time. And sometimes it's not murder. Sometimes it's abuse. It's domestic abuse. Both men and women do it. Obviously, men more than women, but they both they can abuse each other. They can abuse the children, and sometimes these lead to deaths. Sometimes it goes too far. But I always said the writing principle here is if he hits you, he'll kill you. So it's just a matter of degree. So it's a difficult subject. It's a huge subject. It's an uncomfortable subject for people to talk about, but it's oh so real and it's oh so important. And that's why there are many, many programs now to help those that are abused domestically get out of the situation. If you're one of them, check it out. Save yourself, save your children. To protect self-image or secrets. This is a huge one, and this is often overlooked, and I think this is good stuff for crime fiction. Remember, everybody walks around with an image of who they are. They're a tough person, they're a kind person, they're a sweet person, they're a smart person, they're a giving person, they're an empathetic person. They're they see themselves in a certain light. Now, that may or may not match with how the world sees the individual, but the, the individual has a self image, and that self image is very powerful. And people will do that, will do whatever is necessary to protect that self image because it defines them, it defines who they are on so many levels. Personally, psychologically, socially, business wise, social wise, you name it, they are defined by their self image. And so people will do almost anything to protect that. If someone is seen as a good, honest businessman, but oh, he has a little secret that he was actually stealing money from the company, or he was having an affair with the secretary, or he was actually manipulating his partners, and suddenly someone stumbles upon this secret and has evidence to suggest he's not such a good guy after all, and look at all these criminal activities or uncomfortable activities that are going on in the background. Well, there's a motive for murder right there, and it happens all too often. People will kill to protect their self image and to protect their secrets. Sometimes people murder to protect others. This is not always wrong. If you're protecting your family, your children, your friends, uh, then sometimes, you have to kill someone to do all that. Hopefully, none of us will ever cross that bridge, but it's out there, and it's a good thing for fiction. And of course, then the whole case revolves around what did the person think? Why did they think this? Was it justified? Was it an excusable killing, if you will? Was it a justifiable homicide? Were they really under threat, or was it perceived? And remember, each character perceives life. It doesn't mean it's true. We all do the same thing. We see our world through our eyes. Each of us do. Our perceptions are often wrong. You know that on many, many levels throughout your life that you have thought something and later to discover that's not exactly correct. Well, people will perceive that they're in danger or their family's in danger or that some harm has been done. And it can spill over into revenge, but it can also be protection. Blackmail would fit right into this. People do things and other people know about them and they use that as leverage against them to get what they want. Maybe it's a business situation, maybe it's a social situation, maybe it's a love triangle, whatever, but someone threatens to blackmail someone else. Well, this damages their self-image, it damages their social world, it damages their their maybe their religious and political and work world. And so these are motives for murders. See if you can incorporate some of this into your stories. People often commit murders to cover another crime. Maybe it's they're doing something illegally. Maybe they embezzled from their company and someone found out about it. Well, that person could destroy their whole career, their entire self image. They could put them in jail. So you can't hide the evidence. It's already been done. The money's already been taken. The paper trail, the electronic trail is there. So the only thing you can do is get rid of the person who found it out and buy time. Sometimes they're the only person that knows or could ever know that you did something. Maybe they caught you in the act, caught the person in the act. So that individual now must do away with that person to save themselves. So to cover another crime is common. Often arson is the crime that is committed rather than murder, and sometimes it's an arson murder. They knock someone unconscious and set their house on fire or their business on fire. And it's to cover other crimes, maybe a burglary, maybe embezzlement, maybe whatever. So murders can occur to cover other crimes. Social and hate crimes is another big subject. People dislike people for odd reasons. They're personal. And that's fine. If you want to dislike somebody, have at it. But the point is you can't act on it. You can't harm that person. You can't humiliate that person, and you darn sure can't kill that person simply because you don't agree with who they are, what they believe, how they feel, how they live. As long as they're not doing harm to you, you have no rights there to, quote, defend yourself or to speak out in a violent manner. Sex, jealousy, and obsession. Well, this comes under a lot of the other crimes we've talked about. This would kind of spill over into that. But wow, sex, drugs, and rock and roll seem to fit into a lot of stuff. But jealousy, uh, someone is having an affair, someone is jealous that the person's still married, so they off the spouse. Uh, Maybe someone is obsessed. These are stalkers. This is a very dangerous situation. We read this all the time. And stalkers are often dangerous people. And they worm their way into an individual's life on so many levels, not only physically, but electronically, sometimes financially. It's amazing how easy it is to tap into people's social media and their phone and their financial stuff. It's amazing how easy it is to follow people around. Uh, it's amazing how easy it is to collect information on someone and to use that information. And stalkers often become violent when they realize that the person is not responding as they feel appropriate, then they act out. They become angry. And sometimes this leads all the way to murder. It's happened in Hollywood more than once. It's happened around the world millions of times. It's a common crime. Mental illness, of course. Um, crazy people do crazy things, and that's the nature of the beast, so to speak. Especially if the mental disorder is of the severity that delusions or hallucinations come into the picture. Now, a delusion is where someone thinks something is something that it's not. They think that a person is out to get them, or they think that their spouse is having an affair. And this delusion becomes real to them, and they know it's true, and they know it's got to be true, and there's no negotiating that. They know it, but it's not real. They're deluded. Their thinking is not clear. They've read the evidence wrong. They've got their own internal biases and their own internal beliefs that have fed into this. And so what they believe to be true is not true. But if they believe it strong enough, then to them it's real. So they act on it. Hallucinations is a whole nother level. This is where people see and hear and feel things that aren't there. Um, they see someone as a monster trying to get them, or they see the TV remote as a taser or a gun or a bomb or a something, and their psychosis, and that's delusions are often part of psychoses. I mean, hallucinations are often part of psychoses. They see that, and to them, it is absolutely 100% real. So they are going to react as if they are threatened. Um, But there are other mental disorders, OCD, PTSD. People do a lot of things when their brain function is not what it should be for whatever reason, through things they have done to themselves by drug abuse or alcohol abuse, or things that were foisted upon them through no fault of their own. Uh, People live in traumatic situations sometimes. Abused children often end up being sociopathic, not thinking clearly. And this is a form of mental illness. It's a form of out of the norm, and it can lead to violent acts in some people. We see it. It used to be thought that all serial killers, were abused as children. Well, that's not true. It's not that simple. What creates a serial killer in the definitions that we use today are multifactorial, and there's no clear cut pattern. Bundy, there's no evidence he was abused. Jeffrey Dahmer, there's no evidence he was abused as a child. And those are two very heinous serial killers. So that type of abuse is not always there. But when it is, and your character has that in the background, it definitely will alter how they see the world, how they feel about the world, how they react to other stresses. And you can use this in your fiction. Drugs and alcohol, of course, play a huge role in a lot of stuff. It alters thinking, it alters perceptions, it creates delusions. It just changes attitudes. I remember back in training and the first few years I was in practice, uh, PCP was big, also called phencyclidine or angel dust. It basically is a drug that makes you psychotic, and until you've handled one of these people, you don't really know what I'm talking about. They are completely out of control, extremely powerful, have absolutely no super ego. There is absolutely nothing stopping them from doing some of the most horrible things you've ever seen, and it's hand to hand combat sometimes to get these people under control and treat them. Seen it many times, and I didn't think I'd ever see a drug worse than that. Well, methamphetamine may be worse. It makes people crazy and paranoid and angry, and it gives them a ton of energy. So methamphetamine abusers are often dangerous people. I'm not saying all of them are, but they often are. Heroin addicts, on the other hand, while they're under the influence, are usually pretty compliant because it's a narcotic, and they get tired and sleepy. But get them in the withdrawal phase, and suddenly there are no limits. Whatever's necessary to get whatever they need to get that next fix. If they have to kill you to do it, they will do it. If they have to break into your house and steal your television and your jewelry and your money and whatever, they will do it. If they have to steal your car, they will do it because they're driven by this need. So I think at the end of the day, what you can see here is in crime fiction, there are a multitude of crimes to choose from. I mean, the list is legion. And as you plot your stories, look at all these crimes. When you look at murder, there are many, many causes for murder. And many of the causes I've talked about actually come in combinations. Um, so you can see that, embezzlement, murder to cover another crime, and self-image, they kind of all go together, along with the fear of incarceration. So think about these crimes, think about everything we've talked about here, think about how you can motivate your characters to do things that fit your story in a realistic fashion. Remember, storytelling is not just one damn thing after another. It's one damn thing because of another. So look at all of these things and see if you can weave some of these motivations, some of these reasons for doing heinous crimes into your stories, and maybe increase the depth of your story a little bit. Well, that's all for this episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you learned a little something. And most importantly, I hope it stimulated your creative juices so that you think about the story you're working on, or maybe the next story or the next story, and say, maybe I can do that. Until next time, this is DP Lyle, and we are here at Criminal Mischief. I'll see you next time.